While this podcast isn't rated explicit, the content may not be suitable for younger listeners. Welcome to Sex for Saints, the Christian couple's guide to great sex. I am your host, certified sex and marriage coach, Amanda Lauder. This is episode 321, Sexual Martyrdom. Welcome to Sex for Saints, a podcast for Christian couples. My goal with this podcast is to help enlighten, educate, and inspire you to understand yourself, your spouse, and your sexuality better. I talk about sex in a way you probably haven't heard before. I'm bold, I'm direct, but I keep everything in line with my strong Christian values. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the podcast. How's summer going for you? Are you crazy busy or are your kids bored yet? We've been trying to keep our kids really busy this summer. We just have the two left at home. Well, the college kid is back home for the summer, but she's off all the time. But the two kids that are going to be juniors this year, we're trying to keep them busy with chores. And then they work for our fishing tackle company and, of course, doing other fun things. But I would love to hear how your summer is going and what's going on with your kids. All right. Well, today's topic, we're going to talk about a topic that is all too common, but not really discussed in this way, sexual martyrdom. So we're going to talk about what it means to be a sexual martyr, why it's detrimental to your relationship and yourself, and how to recognize it and shift out of this mindset. So let's get started. So what is sexual martyrdom? First, we need to define that, right? Essentially, it's one partner consistently sacrificing their own needs, desires, and boundaries for the sake of their spouse. Now, this often seems very noble on the surface. But it can create a whole lot of problems both within yourself and in the relationship. So choosing to become a sexual martyr often stems from a complex mix of personal beliefs, societal pressures, and relationship dynamics. So let's unpack some of those common reasons. First is cultural and religious beliefs. So many of us grew up in religious communities and cultures that place a very high value on self-sacrifice and duty within marriage. Sacrifice, and specifically self-sacrifice within marriage, has been the topic of many church talks by the leaders in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I found an article from 2020 from Elder David A. Bednar in an address titled The Divinely Designed Pattern of Marriage. And he says in that talk, quote, "The vision of marriage as a holy order based on enduring covenants, duties, and lifelong sacrifice stands in stark contrast to a modern secular concept of marriage. That worldly formulation has virtually nothing to do with losing your life in service to a family or in self-sacrifice for spouse and children." Close quote. So with talks and quotes like that, many learned that to be a quote unquote good spouse always means putting your spouse's needs first, even at the expense of your own well-being. And this can create a sense of obligation to be a martyr in the relationship. All right, the second is a fear of conflict. So some of us became sexual martyrs because we fear sexual conflict and the consequences of saying no. So we worry that expressing our own needs and setting boundaries might lead to arguments, rejection, or our partner withdrawing from us and becoming very emotionally distant. So to avoid these potential conflicts, we choose to silently sacrifice our own desires. Third is low self-esteem. So low self-esteem can play a really significant role in lots of aspects of relationship, right? But when someone doesn't value themselves or their own needs, they might believe that they don't deserve to have their desires met. And this can lead to a pattern of constant giving without expecting anything in return, reinforcing that cycle of martyrdom. And then fourth is a desire to please. So there are those of us who derive a sense of identity and worth from pleasing others. They feel very validated when their spouse is happy, even if it means ignoring their own needs. And this desire to be seen as the quote unquote perfect partner can drive them to consistently sacrifice their own well-being. Fifth is misunderstanding love and sacrifice. So there's often a misconception that love is all about sacrifice. Now, compromise and collaboration is indeed part of any healthy relationship, but it becomes problematic when it's one-sided and leads to self-neglect. So people might mistakenly equate their martyrdom with being loved and devoted. So this brings us to the very crucial question. Do people even realize that being a sexual martyr is a choice? Well, many people who become sexual martyrs don't. They don't realize that it's actually a choice. Their actions are often rooted in very deep-seated beliefs and patterns that have been reinforced over time. And they might not see an alternative way of being in the relationship, believing that this is just simply their role and their lot in life. So when sacrifice becomes normalized in a relationship, it can be hard to recognize that it's a choice. For example, if Jane always puts John's needs first, and this dynamic has been in place for years, it becomes their normal. Jane might not even question whether there's another way to approach their intimacy, but over time, she may recognize that she feels resentful and doesn't feel as close to him as she thinks she should. So even when there's an awareness that they are choosing martyrdom, the fear of changing can be paralyzing. The ideas of inserting their own needs and potentially disrupting the relationship dynamic can be very daunting. So the comfort of the familiar, even when it's uncomfortable, often outweighs the uncertainty of change. And this is where a lot of women and couples come to me. They know something is wrong, but they don't know how to fix it. They're afraid of rocking the boat. They feel like they lack the tools or support to make different choices. They might not know how to communicate their needs effectively or fear they won't be understood or respected by their partner. And this is where coaching can help. So let's break this down with an example. So imagine Jane and John. Jane has always been the one to put John's needs first in their sex life. She agrees to have sex with him even when she's tired, not in the mood, or even when it causes her pain or discomfort. She does this because she believes it's her duty as a wife, or perhaps she thinks it will make John happier and thus improve the marriage. So over time, Jane starts to feel resentful. She feels unheard and unappreciated, leading to emotional distance between her and John. Now, this situation often leads to what is known as the poor me attitude. Jane might start to think, why is it always me who has to give in? Why can't John see how much I'm sacrificing? This mindset not only fosters resentment, but it also positions Jane as a perpetual victim in her marriage. She feels powerless and overlooked, which can erode her self-esteem and self-identity. Interestingly, being a martyr can also lead to a one-up position. Jane might begin to think, I'm the better spouse because I sacrifice more. I'm more giving, more loving, more selfless. This creates a sense of superiority that isn't healthy. It can make her feel morally righteous, but also lonely and disconnected from John because she views herself as being on a higher plane of sacrifice. Conversely, the martyr can also feel in the one down position, feeling like a victim, like we talked about. Jane might see herself as less powerful in the relationship because she constantly gives in. This dynamic can create a cycle of negativity where Jane feels trapped, undervalued, and resentful, while John might feel pressured, guilty, or even oblivious to Jane's true feelings. So this martyrdom affects the relationship in very significant ways. Communication breaks down because Jane isn't expressing her true needs and desires. John might start to feel a mix of confusion, frustration, or guilt, sensing Jane's unhappiness but not understanding the root cause. The intimacy that they once shared started to diminish because their sexual relationship is no longer based on mutual pleasure and respect, but on duty and sacrifice. So, how do we break free from this destructive cycle? Well, it starts with self-awareness and honest communication. Jane needs to recognize her own worth and understand that her needs are just as important as John's. She needs to set boundaries and express her desires openly. For example, instead of agreeing to sex out of obligation, Jane might say, "I love being close to you, but I'm really tired tonight. Can we plan for tomorrow?" This way, she's valuing her own needs while still being considerate of John's. I have a lot of really great examples of how to do this on my 16 ways to say no freebie. If you go to my website, amandalauder.com, then it will pop up on your screen and you can get this freebie for 16 ways of how to say no that actually builds more intimacy and connection. All right, so it's not just women who are sexual martyrs, right? Men can be sexual martyrs too. So let's imagine a couple, Mike and Sarah. Mike is a loving husband who believes in making Sarah happy, and that's the most important part of their marriage. Over time, he starts to put her needs and desires above his own, particularly when it comes to their sexual relationship. So Sarah has a lower desire for sex compared to Mike. She often feels tired or stressed, or sex isn't a priority for her. And Mike, wanting to be considerate and supportive, starts to suppress his own desires. He stops initiating sex to avoid making Sarah feel pressured or guilty. Instead, he wants for her to show interest, which happens quite infrequently. When they do have sex, he focuses entirely on her pleasure, wanting to make sure it's a good experience for her, but often doesn't voice his own wants and desires in the bedroom. He doesn't want to scare her with his sexuality or pressure her to do something that she doesn't want to do. Mike is your classic nice guy. Initially, he feels good about being accommodating and selfless. However, as time goes on, he starts to feel frustrated and unfulfilled. He misses the intimacy and connection that comes with a mutually satisfying sexual relationship. Mike's resentment builds, but he doesn't voice his feelings because he doesn't want to seem demanding or selfish. Mike's self-sacrifice leads him to develop that poor me attitude. He starts to think, why doesn't Sarah care about my needs? Why do I always have to be the one to compromise? Why do I always have to be the one to initiate? This mindset deepens his sense of dissatisfaction and disconnect from Sarah. He feels unappreciated and begins to withdraw emotionally. Now, interestingly, Mike might also find himself in the one-up position, thinking, I'm the better spouse because I'm the only one who sacrifices more. I am more understanding and considerate. This can create a sense of moral superiority for him, which isn't healthy. It leads to silent judgment of Sarah, further driving a wedge between them. He might also feel in a one-down position, seeing himself as a victim of the situation. He feels powerless and trapped, believing that expressing his needs will only cause conflict or hurt Sarah. And this reinforces a cycle of silence and sacrifice, perpetuating his unhappiness. So as a man, Mike might worry that if he expresses his needs, Sarah will reject him, causing him emotional pain and further distancing them. He wants to be seen as a supportive and understanding partner. He believes that by putting Sarah's needs first, he's fulfilling his role as a good husband. And this desire can drive him to continually sacrifice his own needs. So to move away from sexual martyrdom, it's essential to shift that perspective and realize that everyone has the right to have their needs and boundaries respected. And a healthy relationship requires a balance of giving and receiving. So building a balanced relationship requires both partners to be aware of each other's wants and desires and needs and to communicate openly. It's about creating a space where both partners feel valued, heard, and respected. And this not only improves the sexual relationship, but also strengthens the emotional bond between partners. So sometimes breaking free from these patterns requires professional help. That is why I love coaching couples so much. We often don't see how we are actually contributing to the dynamic that has been created that's causing us so much pain. We just think our partner needs to change so that we can be happy. But in couples coaching, I help each partner see their part of the dynamic and give them the tools to change it. I coach them on how to have more productive conversations, how to stay calm during conflict, to work together to create better solutions where both partners are valuing themselves and each other's needs, wants, and desires in the relationship. Being a sexual martyr might seem like a noble sacrifice, but ultimately harms both you and your relationship. By recognizing this pattern, communicating openly, and setting healthy boundaries, you can foster a more fulfilling and balanced relationship. All right, my friends, that's all I've got for you today. Remember, love is a journey, not a destination. Stay committed, stay passionate, and stay connected. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. If you want to learn how to apply what I teach you on this podcast, I want to invite you to work with me in my Embrace You coaching programs. In my coaching programs, I teach you all of the skills and tools you need to have a better relationship with yourself, your spouse, and your sexuality. You also get weekly coaching to help you apply what you are learning in your own relationship. For more information, go to amandalauder.com and click Get Help in the menu to see my programs for both men and women. Like what you're hearing on this podcast? Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Don't forget to leave me a review and share it with your friends.